Hey everybody, Jem Schofield here of the C47 and another episode of Gearbox 2.0. I am using a new streaming solution because, well, YouTube screwed the pooch and they kind of messed things up and they took out Hangouts on Air, and so I have to use this. And there's a little bit of a delay here, so what I need is some help from you guys to make sure that everything is okay in terms of the connection. I've really only used this one other time, and the problem when I used it last time was when I was in Scotland. We were doing an episode of Camera and Flask, and about 25 to 30 minutes into the show, we had a complete and utter dropout. And that was really because of the internet connection, not because of the streaming software solution. Harrison, thank you for the thumbs up. And hello, Ryan. Hello, Harrison. Hey, Bill. And here we are back in the USA and back with another episode after what seems like forever and ever. So, it's been a long one, and the intention was not to do nothing when I was away on vacation, but it was still a nice break, and I was really in rural Scotland. I am body-wise 8 hours ahead right now, so I don't know what the F is going on. Gerald, how's it going, man? I'm glad it sounds good. AV is fine, a little low bit rate, but it's fine. Interesting. So my connection should be pretty good based on speed test. I'm still trying to figure out how to tweak this streaming software, and I might have to minimize windows and do other things to kind of tweak this. I'm also trying to figure out things related to frame rate because Lightstream, which is the solution that I'm using, does not support 24p, or at least it doesn't seem to. So my camera is set to 24, but I'm pushing through, and apparently I am broadcasting at 30 frames per second. So Bill and everybody else, just keep me up to date in terms of what this connection is like, how it actually works out, and all of that fun stuff. It's chat time, so I am definitely monitoring the chat. Please, let's talk about some stuff. It's probably not going to be a full hour today, mainly because I don't even know where I am right now. It's a miracle that we got going even 4 minutes late, and that was really mainly because I had started the stream from Lightstream, and then YouTube didn't see it, so I had to kind of do what I would say blowing into an Atari cartridge. Some people would say Sega, other people would say Nintendo. But that's how you know how old somebody is, by what they're blowing air into, what type of cartridge it is for what video game system. So I'm Atari, ColecoVision, Intellivision. I can't change that, but I will tell you that my trip was good. I've got new scotch in the house. Today at 6 p.m. Eastern, we are doing an episode of Camera and Flask. I'm going to give you a heads up on this one. So Caleb is in California, or traveling back from California. He was at the S1H event where they announced the final specs for that Panasonic camera, also that 24-70 lens. Fits nicely into that whole 6K, is 6K the new 4K thing, and that means he won't be on the show today. Ben will be, fingers crossed. He is on vacation with his family. He thinks he has enough internet connection. They're staying in a very small place, but he's going to try to do it from outside at midnight. Should be fun. So, Bill, that's the answer to that. Yes, Camera and Flask tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern. It will be myself and Ben today. We'll be doing part 2 of the semi-miserably faily episode that we had last time because of the internet. And hopefully we'll get into chatting a little bit more about these cameras, especially now that the S1H has been released. Gerald says, did you shoot any while on vacation? Anything we can expect to see soon? So the idea was to actually do live streams for Gearbox while I was away, and also to do Camera and Flask both weeks. But what actually happened was I had internet connection that was under 1 megabit per second upload, and as a result, it was just there you go. So sorry I'm missing this one. Going to eat lunch with my wife, Joseph. I will talk to you later. Thank you for showing up to say hi. So the answer is, Gerald, that I did a lot of still photography. So X-T3 was in full force and rotation, primarily with the 35 f2 lens, shooting most of the stuff for the trip. So maybe I'll do an episode at some point about some stills and things like that. And occasionally, one day, I put the 56-1.2 on there just to get a little bit of something different. So so S1H looks like it's going to be, what is it? Is it $3,500 US, I believe? Again, I'm in a little bit of a reality distortion field right now. And we also have now official announcements on the A6100 and the 6600 from Sony. I have not looked at the specs. Thanks, Travis. It's good to be back as well. $1,400 US dollars, no comments. Bill, is that for the lens or for the camera body? I'm assuming that's for the new lens, but if you could let me know on that, that would be awesome. Yes, sorry, it's $4,000 US for the S1H. It's a beast of a camera, let me just say, at least on paper. And, you know, Panasonic has been getting the imaging thing pretty right over the years, but this is really new territory for them. You know, they've been living primarily, at least in that form factor, in micro four thirds for a long time. I don't think there's any question in anybody's mind whether or not the GH4 and the GH5 are capable camera systems. Richard, that's a all caps, many exclamation points gem. So I appreciate that. So there you go. So, you know, going into this S1H, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later today, and I'll look even more at the specs, I would say that, you know, the big question is this heat dissipation really effective? It's unlimited recording time, so we're going to find out pretty quickly as people put this camera body through its paces when they get it in their hands, what that's going to be like, especially in adverse weather conditions. And I don't mean whether it's if it's weather sealed or not. It's just what happens when you start to get into those high 30-degree Celsius, those 90 to 100-degree ranges Fahrenheit with the camera body, and we'll have to see how that all goes. Zlatko, hello. So the 16 to 55 is $1,400 US dollars, 70 to 350, quite a range, 1,000. I don't know what the aperture is there. Is that a constant? I'm assuming that's a variable aperture on a 70 to 350, but let me know. A6100, $750 US, and then a 6600 body, $1,400 US. Is the A6600, what's the big difference in there? Because again, I haven't looked at specs because it was, as I was setting up, that's when all this stuff was going on. It seems that the letter G is the most expensive in the alphabet. That's pretty funny. Yeah, for Sony, for sure. And maybe for some other people, I don't know. Actually, for Panasonic, it might be the least expensive because that's where your GH4, GH5 are, and then they're going to other things. Interestingly, Panasonic does claim it's weather sealed even with the vent. Interesting. Yeah, well, they've got to have some sort of venting system, but it may just be the way that they've designed that and the direction and stuff. I will be picking one up. It's going to be great B-cam for our VariCam LT, a great camera system. Look, Panasonic makes pretty images. Looks like they've spent some time, though I might be wrong, on their UI. Maybe there's arguing to be had here, but I don't think so. The EVA 1 has arguably, or not arguably, one of the worst thought out menu systems I've seen in a modern camera system. It just doesn't have a lot of logic to it. But it looks like with this SH1, when they're talking about going in and actually trying to sort out where you have, you know, what basically frame size you have, what, you know, resolution, recording format and all that stuff. It's like a drill down menu, which I think is very smart. So the 70-350 is a 4.6 to a 6.3. Yep, that's what makes sense. Which variable aperture on a G. Okay, yeah. Sounds good. Boom, boom, boom. Just kind of looking at your notes, everybody. Harrison retracted the message. I don't know what it was because I didn't get to it. And there you go. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about the streaming thing of this, first of all. You know, people ask what we're using for streaming, and it's different for all of us. But when YouTube, aka Google, aka internet content 800-pound gorilla, decided, hey David, that they were going to take out and away Hangouts on Air, which was a great solution. I mean, for simplicity's sake, you just go into YouTube Classic. This whole new beta YouTube Studio thing is kind of garbage, but I'm starting to get used to it. It's got less features rather than more over the old one. It's more confusing in some ways than was before, but you know, you get used to everything. You swipe up, you swipe down. Things change with different operating systems and new versions of phones, and they do with all of this crap as well. And we just adapt. That's what we do. We are here to survive, and if we have to survive in this world, then we adapt. So, so they take away Hangouts on Air, and I was a little terrified of that because, at least for Cameron Flask, for myself, Caleb, and Ben, it was a really nice solution. You would just do everything in one little ecosystem. I could send everybody a little invite with a link. They would paste that into their browser, and then we could do that little 3-up, and I could switch cameras, and it was a beautiful thing. Very limiting. No additional graphics. Yes, you could share your screen and things like that, but it was a little bit annoying. So annoying and simple at the same time. It's annoying because lack of features, but the simplicity there was awesome. And I sound like I'm rambling because I am, because I'm super jet lagged. So what did I do? I had to look for a solution. I didn't want to go into something that was too expensive. I didn't want to go into something that was going to be too complicated. So I found something called Lightstream, which is what I'm using now. And it allows me actually a lot more flexibility in terms of graphics and things. It's just a little bit more work because you have to put in a key, you have to connect and basically go live with the streaming software, and then that pushes that to the YouTube platform, and then you basically go live from there. And it is just a, it's better and worse as well. But I'm just getting used to it, and I also have to get used to sort of the whole lag and delay, because if I'm monitoring the picture with everybody, it's kind of a pain. But we'll get there. Okay, so just let me know, give me an update in terms of, can you hear me and can you see me well enough? Does it seem relatively clean in terms of the stream? And I'm going to check the chat here. So, Bill says, Jem, why is Sony so expensive in your opinion? Who is going to pay $1,400 for an APS-C 16-55 f2.8? It's a good question. I mean, I would say, and Ryan mentions FS7 owners, that's, you know, that's a workhorse lens, and the 2.8, it's a decent range. You know, I love the 17-55 for full frame. 16-55 is a little limiting. I mean, look, when it comes to a lens, and I know that for this S1H that Panasonic has also announced a 24-70. I've got a 24-70 right now on the C200. I think that's a great range overall, but the reality is that when you are in a run and gun situation, it's sort of like the ideal lens in the world is an 18-120, you know, at a 2.8. That's what you want. I mean, I think that that's the magic lens, right? So Are we going to get that all of the time? Not really. And if you do, it's going to be a big honking lens. But, you know, I think it's people who want a versatile lens that they can use on many camera systems. I don't think that $1,400 lens is something that you're really considering seriously for a 6100 or 6600. I think that you have to be thinking about super 35 millimeter production more so for that type of thing. So let's see. Yes, looks good, looks good. Hello, Jem, welcome back. Thank you, 3+. And 360 grad, what is this all about? What's going on here? New things happening. So yeah, Tommy's, you know, pointing out that we're really looking at a 24 to 70 equivalent when it comes to full frame. And that's what that 16 to 55 is. I mean, you always have to remember that when we're talking about optics, that we're talking about a similar field of view. We're not necessarily talking about exactly the same depth of field when we make these comparisons. When you're talking about small to large sensor comparisons, for instance, micro four thirds, when we're talking about a 24 millimeter lens that is made for a micro four thirds camera system, it will have a similar field of view to close to a 50 millimeter lens. But, and this is the big but, it's still a 24 millimeter lens in terms of the optics. So you're going to have depth of field properties that are going to be more like a 24 millimeter lens, exactly like a 24 millimeter lens, but your field of view in terms of how much of the world you are seeing will reduce because of that sensor size. So that's just the way it works. I mean, it works that way with something like this as well. I mean, you know, this is, this I found in a bookshop. Oh, it's still, listen, it actually works. This is a Canon 514 XL. It is a Super 8 film camera. It's got a zoom lens on it. It is a 9 to 45 millimeter. It is a beautiful little thing. It runs on AA batteries, and it's an f1.4. It's super cool. And I picked it up, believe it or not, for about 15 pounds in a bookshop. It was sitting, it was perched or sitting precariously on top of some books. It shoots at 9 or 18 frames per second. You can switch it over here. It has a zoom rocker from wide to telephoto that will go between the 9 to 45 millimeter range. It has a little macro for the long end of the lens. It has a macro for the wide end of the lens. This thing is awesome. I mean, look at this. This is, you know, they got it right in terms of the size. They also make a version of this, which is a sound version, where it's basically taking that space on the film, and it will actually record sound. It's a slightly larger one. And just so you can see what it looks like, because this film is not, I don't even know what's going on with this. This is the inside. So how cool is that sucker? Hey, has a self-timer, and it looks good. I'm digging this thing. And, you know, it's a fun little toy to pick up for what equates to about, I think in the end, $23 US. And I cleaned the contacts inside. They were all messed up from the battery, and it seems like the thing works. Okay, and by the way, I think it's going to be pigs flying and a cold day in downstairs before we actually see that Kodak Super 8 camera that they announced now 3+ years ago. All right, back to the chat. 17 to 55 is a little cheaper. You have to buy an adapter. Yep, it'd be nice if you could metabone it without removing stuff from the back. I know it's a, you know, these are the days we live in, Ryan. Your thoughts on the Z6? I've been using it for the past few months. Never considered Nikon as a player in video, but it's really changed my perspective. You know, Tommy, I don't really have any perspective on that. Nikon clearly makes fantastic stills cameras. I think when this camera was announced, it was really exciting. I think also it didn't hurt that there was this whole hype with the Atomos announcement. It'd be nice if they got that working. Obviously, with the S1H, there's actually a press release that's out or coming out from Atomos on the raw recording capability. One nice feature about that camera, along with everything else, is that you can record, I believe it's 10-bit 420 internally at the same time as spitting out a raw signal over HDMI, and you can do that to an Atomos recorder. I'll probably be quite happy with the 10-bit 422 internal recording. I think that for most situations, if you're getting into data rates, you know, 300-400 megabits per second, and if that camera is a modern camera, then there's no reason why you can't use that for the vast majority or all of the things that you're doing. And with 14 stops claimed of dynamic range, I think it sounds pretty cool. Will I make a video for the camera for the 514 XL? Bill asks. It will be fun. I hope so. I'm really incredibly backlogged right now in terms of content for Gearbox. I have some boxes of equipment, some of it that have been sent in, some of it which is my own stuff that just is personal interest that I need to start to get on top of. So next week will hopefully be a recorded episode of Gearbox where I will be going over at least one piece of equipment. That may become a trend for the next few weeks, and then we'll do the live stream with Camera and Flask, or it may wind up being sort of back and forth. I still haven't figured all that out. Started to really think about this a little bit more on my vacation. I've got some more organization to do, and I'm trying to figure out exactly how that gets tweaked for the channel. Because for me, the plan is to continue Gearbox, to continue Camera and Flask, and to just sort of hone that content to continue to make it better content. I do like this Lightstream platform because it will allow me to put some more graphics up and some more information. So we'll see how that all goes. So let's see what else. Oh, I got a 360 grad company where you work, blah, blah, blah. So what else are we going to talk about here? So I have, I guess maybe I'll do an episode on this, but I am kind of excited because, you know, I've been using the Wireless Go from RØDE quite a lot with the X-T3 while I've been traveling. And they've now released this lavalier Go, which is an $89 lavalier mic, sorry, $79 US lavalier mic designed to terminate into and go right into that Wireless Go system. Previous to that, I've been using my actual lavalier mic from RØDE, which is great because it has that Micon connector, and I can just basically use that Micon 2 and the Micon 2, I think Micon 1, I think, and adapt it to this. But this is great because it just goes right in here. Now, there's a lot of concerns about the fact that it's not a threaded positive connection, but you'd have to work really hard to unplug this. There would have to be something pretty drastic to unplug it from there. And for $79, I think it's great. So I'm really happy with that Wireless Go system. The famous pouches. There's lots of pouches. That's all about. I'm practically like the wallaby. Okay, Jem, could we do more practical stuff if it comes to light and Camera and Flask? We can. You know, the difficulty with Camera and Flask is that we've got 3 people feeding in, and when you really want to show things having to do with craft and what you're doing, it gets a little difficult, in my opinion, in that type of forum, in that format is the right word, is what I'm looking for. And I think that your question, for me personally, is more relevant to Gearbox than it is to Camera and Flask. One of the things that I've been trying to sort out, and maybe this new streaming platform is that, is how I can start to do some multi-camera things. We're getting pretty sophisticated in some of these new gimbal systems and being able to follow and track things. And so in an ideal world, what I'd like to do is set it up where I might have a tight shot and just, you know, just spike a place for me to land where I can talk to camera. But what I can do is be a little bit more freeform and show you guys in a 15 to 30 minute period of time how to do something related to lighting or composition or whatever it's going to be. I need to figure that out. I think that I need to build a set for that, and I think the set needs to be a set that's going to allow me to do more than one thing. So if I want to do something and make that a bedroom or a living room or whatever it's going to be, then I have that flexibility. So there's some thoughts about that. This particular building that I'm in needs a little bit of work. And by the word little, I mean a lot, so that I can make sure that it's quieter, it's weatherproof, that it can adapt to that. I have a lot of space in here, both on this level and up there. And so there's a lot of opportunity here. It's one of the reasons that we got this place. And so I think in the next 12 months, fingers crossed that now that we've sort of settled here, I can start to think about how to make investments into this space to be able to do that. But we've kind of taken the approach of small steps, and also have had to handle all of the other things related to having a family and education and all of those things. So it's going to take a little bit of time, but I just want you to know that the overall goal here is I don't necessarily want this to be the format of Gearbox. I really want Gearbox to evolve into something that is worth watching every week for everybody. Hello, everyone. Hey, Jem. This is the Post Color blog. I need to check out those RØDE Wireless GO systems. I always think in post, which is fine, but I like to dabble in this. Yeah, I mean, I think that for a couple of $100, these suckers are well worth it. There's some new stuff coming down the pike in audio, not just from RØDE, so I'm excited to see that stuff too. Jem, my prediction, if color lighting RGB was the trend of last year, 2020, the year of the gobo. Yeah, we'll see what happens. I still have my Dado Light system, and I still have the little 85mm lens attachment that I can put gobos into. I think we will see a lot of projection for the next 12 months, and then I think people will settle down and they'll start to figure out that one or two lenses on that spotlight from Aputure will be used for that hard light and to bounce light off of certain things and to use those in interesting ways. So why not make a 360 bullet time studio setup? Bill, come on, let's be serious here, guy. That would be cool, but the realities of pushing all of that stuff for, well, in a couple of years, that might be a possibility. I think Wandering DP does a decent job of talking about lighting setups by looking at screenshots and talking through them. Maybe not the same thing, though. Yeah, Ryan, I think that Wandering DP really has their lane. And I think that between the Patreon channel and what he's doing in terms of the podcast, I think that, that's what he's doing exceptionally well. And so I listen to that podcast. I actually have never watched an episode. I've just seen little promos, and I probably should jump into the Patreon and start to see those breakdowns. It's, as much as I'm loving everything that Matt Workman is doing with CineTracer, I think myself and other people miss his breakdowns because I think he did that so well. But he's a man of many talents and a man who is on a mission to create something that nobody else has created as a tool for us to use for pre-visualization, and also is, for me, a great learning tool in terms of setups. So we'll see where all that stuff goes. I'm thinking, as I always do, about lots of things. CineTracer is a great tool and also a great educational tool. And so it would be really cool to do, you know, occasionally, once a month, once every couple of months, a sort of idea of a lighting breakdown in a bigger space. And using CineTracer to do that may be something that I'm going to look at in the future. So yeah, I think, you know, there's a lot of stuff to talk about here. I'm going to have to get up on the specs on this 60-100 and 60-600. I don't think that they're going to be the camera systems for me, but I do like that there are some cameras that are also coming into that same space. That sort of, you know, $750 to $1,000 US that people can look at as sort of next evolution. And Sony's doing a great job of their AF system. It's going to get pretty busy in terms of the larger-ish cameras as well in the next 4 to 5 months. And so I'm excited about that. And then we still have the unicorn, the A7S, you know, next camera. And we'll see what happens with that. So what are you using to create the slash in the background? It looks great. I am using, actually, a light that I don't use a lot in production, but it is the L5C over there. And that's the ARRI Fresnel. ARRI was really the, well, I'm going to say the first, but they may have been the first to really go into the LED Fresnel market in a big way. So functionality-wise, they're not as, well, actually, I'll say this. If you're looking at the L series from ARRI, they're easy to rent everywhere. Quality of light is nice. I think that some of the newer Fresnels have, at least reading on camera, a little bit of a nicer quality from some of the companies. But they're very, very flexible, and they, along with the Stellar app and also being able to connect to them in other ways, are very capable in terms of doing lots and lots of different things. And they are RGB W, so they are, you know, really good at that. But that slash is something that you could get with pretty much any Fresnel harder source that spots and floods. And you could, you know, I mean, you could literally use an open face with some barn doors and get something similar. An Omni light from, you know, from Lowell would work. Or there's, you know, just regular old hot lights. And if you're setting up a studio setup and it's far enough away, you don't necessarily have to invest in a new light for getting that type of look and feel. It's just a slash of light, which can be accomplished with some barn doors and a harder light source. So pretty easy to do. You can dial in color with these if you want, but you could just throw a gel on your light and get color as well. Dustin, Gem, NEC 500 Mark II comments. I've just seen some super early rumor specs and photos. Not sure how valid they are. I've looked at those as well. I don't know. I mean, we're definitely relatively due for a new Cinema EOS camera. It has been a while. The question is it EF mount? Is it PL mount? Is it the new RF mount? Is it all of those things with the rumored interchangeable mount system? I don't know. You know, the C300 Mark II in many ways, 4+ years later, is one of the better values in a sub $10,000 cinema, digital cinema or compact digital cinema camera. You know, the Achilles heel of that camera system is really just off-speed recording. But if you're not looking for anything above 4K, it ticks almost every box. Sure, I'd love it if it had a ProRes RAW, Blackmagic RAW internal recording. Sure, I wish that, you know, as a camera system, you know, that it had higher speed options. But I think overall, from an image quality standpoint, for the money, it is a beast of a camera. The C200 evolved and devolved in certain ways. It's a very different camera. Not as flexible in terms of internal recording options with the camera system, and arguably even with the, you know, the RAW, Cinema RAW Lite, because it's such a high data rate or relatively high data rate, you know, and then you are recording to SD cards if you're not using that, and then you're at 150 megabits per second. Now, very, very usable in most situations. But C500 Mark II, C300 Mark III, whatever the next camera is going to be, I'm assuming it's going to be a hybrid of what's in the C300 Mark II and the C200. I assume that there will be some advances in some of the technology they're using. And if Canon is looking forward, then I'm hoping that it is something that's going to have 6K resolution, which gives a little bit of flexibility in post. I'm not saying it's going to. And I think full frame does make sense, but I still think there's a big market, and I'm quite happy to be living at the moment in Super 35 in terms of frame size. A lot more options in terms of lensing for your camera systems as well. David, just got my new Aputure Light Dome 2 Friday. Haven't had a chance to use it. The construction quality seems great. It is a great modifier. I am very happy with the Light Dome 2. They're killing it over at Aputure. They are really listening to users. I think that it's a beautiful thing. So we'll see where they go, but there's not a lot of missteps right now with Aputure. And I think that they are evolving as a lighting company, as are many of the other lighting companies. So I'm excited to see where things go. Do I have any vintage lenses? I do, Bill. I have quite a few. Some of my favorites are the Olympus Zuiko lenses, and I've created some content on that way back. I've been doing this for a long time. And I use lens adapters with those lenses sometimes. I love the look of them. One of my favorites is the old 55-1.2. It's a tiny little full frame lens from Olympus. So Olympus Zuiko, good value for your money. And just check out and do some research into the coatings. That 55-1.2 has a different coating, so it's very yellow. It doesn't really match with some of the other lenses in there, but I think that those are beautiful manual lenses. And hop over to Caleb's channel at DSLR Video Shooter if you want to check out vintage lenses as well. He is pretty obsessed. And, you know, they're good things to be playing around with. My only advice when you're talking about using vintage lenses is you either need to commit to a focal length and not worry about it on a particular project, or if you are going to use more than one focal length, understand that those coatings and which lens you're using could vary the look of what you're getting in camera considerably. So it's important to think about that when you're using vintage lenses, because if you wanted to say use 2 to 4 focal lengths, you want to make sure that they're from the same era, that they are similar or the same in terms of coatings. And I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of people like to use Zeiss lenses, is because through these different families of lenses, they all match with each other. Zeiss really puts a lot of attention on making sure that they do that. Which outside baffle do I use on the Light Dome? I use the Magic Cloth. I love it. I think that, you know, the softer, the better when you're going for soft light. That doesn't mean that you want that all of the time. So sometimes a lighter modifier fabric, you know, silk, rag, as we might call it, is appropriate. But especially when I'm bringing in a bigger key source, I like to use something that's going to just make the softest light possible. So that Magic Cloth does a really, really good job of that. Cool. Dustin just gave Bill a heads up on Red User and using EF modified contacts lenses. So that's pretty cool. What else we got? I don't know. We'll see what's going to happen with these new cameras. I think that we've got IBC coming up in September. So that means more cameras, probably. It's the only big show, but there is NAB New York, which I'll be flying out to and doing 2 workshops off-site for. And as far as the autumn or fall shows, that's probably the only other show where I could see announcements. But we're seeing now kind of a trend where announcements can happen at any time. So I don't know what's going to happen there. What else are we going to talk about? Anything else we want to go over? I'm going to look down at the chat and see if anything else pops up. We've been going for about 40 minutes here, and I think it's time for me in a few minutes to start to settle down. wind this thing down. Don't forget, Ben and I will be on today, fingers crossed, with his internet connection for our next episode of Camera and Flask. It will be part 2 of Is 6K the New 4K? And we will, of course, be talking about the S1H, and we'll be talking a little bit more about thoughts related to 6K camera systems, full frame versus APS-C, any questions that you have. Ryan says, talking about the vintage lens look, talking about diffusion contrast filters might make a good topic. Yeah, I mean, diffusion and contrast filters and using filters in general is a relatively big subject. I think it's an important subject. One of the things that we run into now is there's no perfect camera system, but nowadays it's almost relatively easy to say that there's no bad camera system. The potential image quality you can get out of virtually every camera that shoots video in the $700 to $800 US and above is pretty amazing for what we're getting nowadays, coupled with good lenses or glass and, of course, lighting and composition. You can really do amazing things with inexpensive tools. So I think that, one of the things that DPs and people who are doing production think about a lot is they think about, how can I have some control over my image? Because the captured image that we're getting, especially if you're shooting in log, is something, or raw, that in post-production can be taken into many different directions. In fact, that's an ongoing topic at Wandering DP, in the Wandering DP podcast, is sort of, as a cinematographer or DP, how much control do you have of the image that you're creating? When you start to use filters, you start to be able to have more control over the image that you're creating. Now, it's a tricky thing because it's very much a relationship between a DP and a director, the client and their expectation. If you have a very educated client, then they may be very surprised when they get into post if they can't do something to your image. But part of what you're trying to do is creatively realize a look and a feel. And if you're losing all control in post-production for that, sometimes filters and being able to soften that image a little bit, making sure that it can't get too sharp, and I don't mean in focus, and also just creating something that is affecting contrast and highlights and what that image looks like is important. So we'll see if that can come up, or if maybe there's a series that can be done related to filters. I use them sometimes. I don't use them all the time. Obviously, the two most common filters that we use are ND, or neutral density filters, and then also a polarizer to affect how the light is coming into that lens and captured. And of course, I can have a dramatic effect on things like reflections, and also being able to make a sky look deeper and having effectively visually more contrast. Yeah. Hey, 3+, thanks for the kind words about learning stuff. I'm glad that things are working out well. Can't afford them, but they seem very nice. Those contact lenses, yes, I think so. There you go. You, Ben, and Caleb are fans of the Dana Dahlia. Would you prefer it over Edelkrone, which in my eyes is one of the only nice working sliders for heavier cameras, C200? So let's talk about that just for a second, and then I think maybe this is our wind down. There are a lot of sliders and dolly systems on the market, and I'm constantly, drool factor in terms of people adding new features. In an ideal world, what I'd really want is I'd want something that could take everything from a mirrorless camera up to, let's just say, a kitted out system that's going from a shoulder rig onto a slider. And I really want to have a remote head and lots of flexibility in terms of obviously this movement, right? So our dolly or tracking. And then that, of course, could be this movement as well, to dolly in, dolly out. But I also want to be able to, ideally on that head, be able to pan and tilt, and to do that with lots less gack. You know, we're small in terms of crew size. The reality is that none of these systems are that. It's kind of like the fact that we don't have a perfect camera system. So one of the reasons that I love the Dana Dolly and I like the Matthews slider and things like that is they're incredibly versatile, and they're very modular. So Dana Dolly, you know, you can just get their track or you can source track, and you can create virtually any length. And the key to the castle when you're using something that's not motorized is the head that you're using, the fluid head. So you have to couple your, well, you have to combine your camera system with a great fluid head with a very versatile slider or dolly system. And I think that the Dana Dolly ticks a lot of those boxes off and is very cost effective. When you want to motorize it, there are some solutions out there where you can do some things to do that. It's not something I've ever done. I think that you almost have to separate those two categories from each other. And I love Edelkron's or Edelkron's industrial design. I think that they are well suited, very much so, for your mirrorless to DSLR form factor and small digital cinema camera. I don't think of them as the company that's making solutions that are for larger camera systems. I think you have to look to Kessler for things like that. I'm interested in this new Rhino to see how that works out, and I'm sure there'll be other companies that come into that space. But I think that what you have to determine is how often are you going to use that tool. A lot of people will use a gimbal system, and they will basically use it as a, I won't say poor man's dolly or poor operator's dolly, but they will use it for basically dolly shots. You know, they'll use it for crane shots, and it can be very quick in terms of production. So it's not really a great, it's not a great answer to that question, but I'm still a huge fan of the Dana Dolly and some of the other solutions that are out there. Wish someone would come out with an affordable camera robot. I hope they don't. That's part of the whole obsolete thing. I want to be working on those cameras. I know that's probably not what you mean, but you know, my personal opinion, Kessler Cine Slider is better than Edelkron. Yes, I mean, Kessler's making and you know, great camera support gear. They may not be viewed as the sexy camera that they were, but I think the industry has changed as a whole. That's not because they're not making good products. I just think that the whole category that they're in has settled down. And so when we're looking for a solution, we're looking for the one that's the right one for what we're doing. I mean, you don't see a lot of flash for Dana Dolly, but they're in rental houses everywhere, and people are buying them, and they're affordable. And the same when we talk about the Cine Slider, and we're talking about the shuttle dolly from Kessler, which is very versatile, and you can motorize that. I just would like to, again, move away from less. I would like less wires, less pieces. The less I have to put together to get to the point of shooting, the better for me, and that's important. Okay, well, I think I'm going to wrap this sucker up. Well, what should I say? You probably wouldn't. Good, that's a little bit of chat stuff. So again, 6 string, Brian, what's happening? You're coming in towards the end, unless you've been here all along and you're just saying hi. I appreciate you being here. So as I said before, next week, now the jet lags, I can feel it, it's setting in. Next week will probably be a recorded episode with a piece of kit that I want to talk about. So I got to work all of that stuff out. What else? Later today, Ben, by a beach, hopefully with enough internet to get a signal. Me, maybe a new scotch, maybe more jet lag or less jet lag, depending on how things work. Maybe a nap. I got to go get all the mail and all the boxes and everything else that's come in while we've been gone. We are going live at 6 p.m. Eastern time, midnight Croatian time, right? 11 p.m. Is it still British summertime, Brexit time? And did I buy a red? I didn't buy red. Nope. Think they're doing great stuff. I want to see what this new camera is. Let's go. Lots of little teases, lots of close-ups, lots of macro shots. We have some idea. We know it can use CFast cards. That's good. I don't know. The landscape, so different. I mean, think about this. Everybody got excited about Kinfinity, but these Z cams, they're listed on B&H. I'm interested about that. We have so many freaking options now. It's amazing. I'm just telling you that it's so good right now. We have so many options, and that makes it so confusing, but it makes it fun to talk about. And, you know, for me, I'm finding that one of the things that I try to focus on the most is, even though I'm getting a lot of this stuff in and I'm trying a lot of stuff, I'm really trying to figure out what the kit is that I'm going to use on a continuous basis for the types of productions that I do. And I think that should be part of our conversations going forward, because what I use isn't necessarily what you should be using. It's figuring out what is that kit that's sitting in your bag or bags that you would go to over and over and over again. We've all made purchases on equipment that's just sitting on the shelf, or that we've used once or twice. We thought it was going to change the way we were going to do production, and we find out it's just not who we are as content creators. It's not our style or the way that we do it. And the more we start to use the tools that we're using, the more we start to figure out what tools we don't want to use. I keep getting excited about gimbals, and that Ronin SC is amazing, but it's not a tool that I'm going to be using very often. So I think that if you're buying a gimbal today and you need something that's small and it's for mirrorless cameras, it's fantastic. The whole tracking thing is a little wonky because your cell phone has to be on top of the camera system that you're using. It cannot be separate. The mimicky kind of thing works great if it's separate. But you know, you find when you start to use these tools that none of them are as good as they are on paper in terms of the specs, but sometimes they exceed what you're reading about in certain areas, which is why we find that there are people who are using certain tools and they love them, because even though people rag on them all the time online, they fit somebody's particular style of production. They're getting out of it what they want out of that. I think that the new Canon mirrorless cameras are a good example of that. They're not a tool that I'm using in my production, but I know more than one person that's now using those EOS R cameras and love them for their productions. What else we got? I think that's it. I think we're going. We basically did an hour. We did just shy of an hour here. We're about 6-7 minutes shy of that. So I appreciate everybody coming and being part of the chat. I'd love these numbers to come up to higher numbers. So if you can tell people, spread the word, let people know who are coming for the first time to subscribe, then that would be great. You know, there we go. I think we're wrapping up here, and I'll be back later on with another live stream, Camera and Flask, 6 p.m. Eastern time today, and Caleb will be back next week, and he'll give us some additional thoughts. Hopefully, we'll hear a little bit about his trip to California. I'm sure we will hear more about Gerald Undone from him as well. And don't forget to tap the bell for notifications. And hopefully I'll see some of you back later on today. I am going to get some organization done, and I appreciate you all very, very much. And we'll chat later. Take care.